really happy to be able to welcome Jill Wagner here today. Jill came to Hawaii and started work right here at Amy Greenwell Ethnobotanical Garden in 1994. And she was a propagationist. She propagated plants at the garden, and she also led docent tours. And she went on, correct me if I get the sequence wrong, but to receive a degree in ethnobotany from the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And since then has become very famous around the island for her work in forestry and landscape restoration and in seed banking. Everybody who works in our field knows who Jill Wagner is, and we're very, very happy to have you here today to share your knowledge with us. So I'm going to leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I love to tell stories, and I love to talk about ethnobotany. So this talk is, I teach ethnobotany to people globally, and I've created this one especially for tonight, and it's more focused on Hawaii and the Pacific region. So I'm going to start. And just to clarify, ethnobotany is, ethno means people, and botany, plants. So it's the scientific study of relationships between people and plants. And it was first coined in 1895 by Dr. John Harshberger. So I wanted to clarify, and that is a beautiful palm that is a lolu palm, and that is at Milili'i, and that's got a lot of ethnobotanical importance. See that nice skirt on it? Looks pretty cool. Can you see? Am I in the way? Okay. Okay. All right. So I want to start with the father of ethnobotany, and that's Richard Evans Schultes. Schultes he had a scholarship to Harvard, and his professor was a guy named Oakes Ames. And what Schultes did was he first went to study the peyote, the use of peyote cactus with people in Oklahoma, and then he went to Mexico and he studied, and from there he went to the Amazon. He was a real scholar, he was a real gentleman, and he was always very properly dressed and very, very polite. He'd never been outside of Boston. I don't know if he did much throughout his career other than being in the Amazon. And he was very well loved by the native people in the Amazon. He learned a couple of languages, I think Waorani, and there was another one that he learned. He was a real scholar. And what he learned about was mushrooms. He learned that when the shamans in Mexico were not taking peyote, they were taking mushrooms. And so he studied that, and he was the first person to really learn about that. And he went on after to study rubber, and he contributed a lot to rubber, creating rubber for products right before World War II. He loved orchids, he studied curares and natural products, and he believed and he kind of foresaw that hallucinogens can facilitate understanding and healing of the human psyche. So that's what he saw was happening with native cultures. And he was said to quote this a lot: the dose makes the poison. And that was, do you know who said that? That was I can't say his name, Paracelsus. It was like from the 1500s. But he is really the father of ethnobotany, of this discipline. And a lot of people sort of came from that lineage. From Schultes, there were his students or his colleagues and friends, and he had a tremendous impact on this the study, but that was his particular study. And he also really worked hard to preserve the Chiribiquete National Park in Colombia, which was not protected, and it's now a World Heritage Site, but he spent most of his life in his later years to protect that site. I also want to acknowledge Terence Kemp McKenna, who taught me a lot about ethnobotany. So I learned ethnobotany in a couple of ways. One is from the Amy Greenwell Garden, because I came to Hawaii in 1994, and the first thing I did is start volunteering at this garden. And I used to go with Manuel. I don't know if anybody knows Manuel. I used to he would go with me in the garden, and he would quiz me. I would tell him that I wanted to learn all the taxonomy of the garden. And it was really fun to do that with him. And so I learned about Hawaiian ethnobotany, and that's what I studied at UH Hilo. And they didn't have ethnobotany degree at the time. What I did is I studied geography, archaeology, and botany. So, but Terence was a real master of the logos. He was a mystic and an ethnobotanist. And he taught me many, many things. But one of the things he taught me was how to propagate plants, which I'm very grateful for. And he also taught me how to understand taxonomy. That's been a huge thing in my life. And I still really, it's one of my strengths, and I still use that all the time working with people globally. So I'm very grateful to him for that. So here's a couple of books I love to read, and this is the masterpiece, if you don't know of it. Seeds of Change, 5 Plants That Transformed Mankind. Henry Hobhouse, I love this guy. He is an incredible historian, and this book is a real treasure. So if you haven't read it and you're into ethnobotany, you can't miss this book. And of course, this is Isabella Abbott, who, the plants are, of course, quinine, because quinine has changed the world, right? That story in itself is amazing. It literally changed the way humans have survived on the planet. And the potato, cotton, sugarcane, and tea. And so he tells these stories, and he really researched. He was a real ethnobotanist. So, and then we have Isabella Abbott, who was a professor at University of Hawaii, Manoa. And this book mine is a little tattered because I've used it for years and years and years. And it is a great book about ethnobotany of Hawaiian plants. So, there seems to be no other subject that is more important to humans. We use plants for daily living, and they are interwoven into our earliest known histories. Let's think about this. Which plants have changed the world? And here's a beautiful painting by Terry Sisko, Kona person who lives in Koloko, and he and I were commissioned by a guy named Mark Solian, a geologist, to paint the Koloko Honokohau area for the park before. This is a picture of what it would look like pre-human, because the 2 parks, Koloko Honokohau and Pu'uhonua o Honaunau parks, did 2 pollen studies. And those pollen studies they did in the ponds, and they could look and find the pollen that was most dominant at pre-human times. So this is a look at a pre-human landscape in Kona, and you can see that these palms, does everybody know what the palms are called? They're called lolu palms, right? And the lolus, this particular one, is a PEP species. So that means that if there's an endangered category, right, it's federally endangered and it's protected. But then if there are less than 50 individuals in the wild, it's a PEP species. So that is plant extinction prevention. And this species has less than 50 individuals in the wild. It's very, very rare today. But interestingly, it was the dominant species in pre-human times in Kona. At both parks, they found that. So the second dominant species, does anybody want to guess based on that picture? Who said what? You're right, a veo. Chenopodium oahuense. So a veo was the second, most prevalent pollen. And after that, I think it was Sitta. I think it was Elima. It's just fascinating to kind of learn about, and of course, the early accounts of Cook and people coming to Hawaii talked about the palms, right? There were accounts of there being a lot of palms. They really were reduced, even when Hawaiians came, but the rats ate seeds. So when the whaling ships came, right, it really reduced. And Hawaiians use these palms, so they also cut them down. They use them for things that they needed in their lives. People know their plants. We grow plants for food, fiber, medicines, timber or building materials, hunting, and adornment. Knowledge has been distributed through shamans, gardeners, oral history, writing, saving seeds, and photography. So this is really what ethnobotany is. It's just looking at the way cultures are using these plants that we have, and I think it's so fascinating. So I want to highlight Hawaiians, but there just a couple of other cultures too, just to kind of compare. So here's Dianella uki. This is a really nice, pretty seed, isn't it? So gorgeous. So here is a map of Pacific Island groups, and you can see Micronesia and the Marianas and Marshall Islands, Kiribati, and then you can see Melanesia consists of New Guinea, and it does, some people talk about Australia-Pacific, so they also talk about maybe some parts of Australia, New Caledonia for sure, Vanuatu, Fiji, Solomon Islands. That is Melanesia. And then you have the Polynesian Triangle, right? You have Hawaii way north, New Zealand, and Easter Island over there in the corner there. So that's just to give you a sense of it. And so Polynesian migrations, when did humans settle in Oceania? People began to settle 40,000 years ago. But remote Oceania was not settled or discovered until about 500 BC. So some of the more remote places took a long time to get settled. Early people came from Australia, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia. But the earliest people came from Taiwan. Have you heard this? They're called the Lapita people. And those people had there's a lot of evidence for this, so I don't think it's really controversial at this point, but their evidence is from archaeological record, linguistics, and genetic evidence. They were expert navigators, and they made unique ceramics. And so you can see that would be going through there, and over time, throughout history, they made it to all these places throughout the Pacific. And they stopped doing some things, like the ceramics, they stopped having access to clay. We certainly wouldn't have clay in Hawaiian Islands so much, but maybe in Melanesia and perhaps Micronesia, I forgot exactly where that ended. But Lapita people created distinct patterns, and they used red slip in their pottery. So it looks a lot to me like tapa designs, doesn't it? Like really early. You can see how over time and history that those kind of designs are are there. They're very beautiful. That one's like a spiral. So artifacts such as shell rings, bracelets, beads, beetles, tattooing chisels, fish hooks, and adze were found. They adopted taro. So I was reading that early the Lapita people, they grew rice. And that makes sense from Taiwan and coming from Asia, right? And then they shifted and they adopted taro, yams, and breadfruit. This is really sort of the main thing for people in the Pacific is having pigs, small, they were a Polynesian pig, not the big pua'as, but small, a Polynesian pig, chickens, and dogs. And they hunted birds. Well, we all know about the bird situation. They did swidden agriculture, and so they burned to do their agriculture. And of course, they really depended on the sea, and they did a lot of fishing. All right, so I just threw this in because it's kind of fun, but the picture with the red like bird, that's the one that is like, I think that's the one that would be the Hawaiian extinct, the malo nalo. The moa nalo, all these moas, these are different sort of drawings and things depicting like New Zealand, Maori stuff. And I was in Christchurch and I saw a big skeleton of a bird at the museum, and it was amazing to see that because it was quite large. But the moa DNA was extracted from a single toe bone of a museum specimen at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. Researchers then were able to piece together 900 million nucleotides of highly fragmented DNA, matching them to specific locations on the genome of the emu, a close relative. In the future, scientists may be able to incorporate that DNA into an emu's egg, possibly bringing the species back to existence. Whatever, I have no comment on that one. But anyway, it's that preserved foot of an upland moa on display at the Natural History Museum in London is kind of, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's really, really big.
Is that a real photo? Right there?
Which one? No, oh, no.
In the Natural History Museum.
Right. That's just somebody's depiction of it. But there was a guy who found, and I was going to show him, he found the bones. I think it was in the 1800s. And he has a skeleton. The way he set that skeleton up was he had the bird very, very upright, and they say that it was unlikely it would have more of an S curve in the neck and the way it stood and everything. But in that time, it was so big, he was thinking of it as this big old guy. So that's kind of fun. What did cultures grow and eat historically? So Hawaiian, we're going to talk about the canoe plants, but we know that kalo is the most important plant in Hawaiian culture, right? And we have yam, breadfruit, maia, and ko. So maia is banana, ko is sugar cane. And then again, the Hawaiians had the pig, the chicken, and the dog. That was what they ate, and as well as fish from the sea. So the other cultures, there's a Mesoamerican, we know about them. The ethnobotany of Mesoamerican cultures is the three sisters, right? Corn, beans, and squash. And China would be rice, millet, pig, and silkworm. And South America, of course, potato, manioc, llama, and guinea pig. Why? I don't know why people eat guinea pigs. I really don't. But I was in Peru and they had guinea pig in the restaurant, but I didn't go for that. So. Does it? All right, we'll take it from you. But Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I wanted to mention one of the great the father of seed banking is I'm thinking of a writer. It's Vavilov. Vavilov started the first seed bank, the first modern seed bank in like 1933 or something. And what he did, he was from Russia, and what he did was his grandfather and his father saw a lot of hunger and starvation in Russia, and he wanted to end that. So what he did is he studied on the origins of plants, and this is really ethnobotany. His focus was on seeds, but what he did was he went all over the world to countries, and he looked for the origins of plants. So he went to Mexico and found the progenitor, the wild relative of corn. And he found it growing with the domesticated corn. And he found that it actually caused those corn plants to be very vigorous and resistant to disease. And he went to Kazakhstan and found apples. That's where the origin of apples are, and all of these plants. And he really contributed a lot. And what he did is he collected seeds, and he brought them back to Russia, to the seed bank. Unfortunately, he got on the wrong side of Stalin. And Stalin said, "What are you doing for the people? You're not doing, this is not, you forget it." So Stalin put him in the gulag and starved him to death. And it's a very, very sad story, but I always like to honor him because seed banking is my particular mission and what I really focus on with the work that I do. So all of this, it's all tied together. So the 19th century explorers. We had James Cook, Vancouver, Freycinet, d'Urville, La Perouse, and others who came and went around. And I wanted to talk a little bit about them. These people wrote down and described what they saw when they came to the Pacific and Hawaii. There were always plant hunters on board, and they made drawings and pressings of what they saw. So herbarium pressings were very, very important. They're still important today. And again, Terrence taught me how to do pressings, and I really appreciate learning that as well. And I love to study some of these early explorers. And so Resolution was Cook's favorite ship, and his third voyage, it's really fascinating to see where he went in the world, his first voyage, because it was sort of around like the equator, like around, I think, on the lower side of the equator, and then, could be wrong about that, but anyway, and then the second voyage was kind of up and over, and then on the third voyage, he came to Hawaii, and his life was ended here, but this is a drawing, a painting that somebody, I think that was that Nelson? One of his botanists and painters painted that Kauai scene. It's really interesting to kind of learn how the village was set up. And here's Kealakekua Bay, Heiau, and that's really cool too. So let's see. So Joseph Banks was on, I know he was on Cook's first his trip to Australia and New Zealand. And he collected a lot of plants. I think it was like 24,000 plants that he collected, and 1,300 were new species. That's an enormous number. And he was the longest serving president of the Royal Society. So he did pressings, and then Sidney Parkinson did paintings and drawings of these plants that are really, really beautiful and really help us to understand what they saw at that time in history. There was a guy named John Weber, and he made drawings and paintings of Hawaii. That's who did that Kauai. I think that was John Weber who did that Kauai paint. It was a watercolor, I think. But his paintings were also engraved. And John Nelson joined Cook on his third voyage, but he was not a professional botanist. He had minimal training from Joseph Banks. And so Banks went on, I think, the first and the second, or for sure the first voyage, and then he was in England for the rest of his career. He was a huge, very big figure. He was a founding member of the Linnaean Society, and what's the one in England? I forgot. The Horticultural Society of, and yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I don't know if it was Q, but anyway, so Banks didn't go on the third voyage, and David Nelson had a minimal amount of, he collected birds, and he did collect about 136 plant specimens, and I have a paper that it lists all the notes and the collections that he made and the species. It's very interesting, but all you can kind of find is that maybe he only did one day of collecting, I think, on Mauna and they talk about above Kealakekua maybe, somewhere, and so so his plant specimens were all compiled in the British Museum, but they were not separated just with his collections. And so it took people, they really made an effort to kind of put all his collections together. And it did say that he was in Kona, and they had to, it took a lot of work. There's a few maybe left, but so that there wasn't a ton of the earliest work. Joseph Rock. Do we know Joseph Rock? I love this. This is done by students. But Joseph Francis Charles Rock moved to Hawaii in 1907, and he started at the University of Hawaii the herbarium, and he published many papers and books, and his favorite place of all was Kona. So he wrote part of his book at Puvawa Ranch, at the famous house, I think it's Pihana Kalani at Puvawa Ranch. And he loved the dry forest. He loved Kona. Of all the places on the Hawaiian Islands, Kona was his favorite place. And Rock did a couple of important things. One thing he did was he described his book, which is the Bible for anybody doing restoration work in Hawaii, is called The Indigenous Trees of Hawaii. It is the book that you have to have, if you're serious. And he described ecosystems. So he very early, he did something different than other botanists. They did a lot of monographs. They they wrote about individual species, but he also described these habitats and associated species. That's very, very important. The second thing that he did that was huge was he did photography. And so think about it. He's in the early 1900s. Photography only started in late 1800s, so it's very, very early. And he took photographs of these native plants. And this is really invaluable today to the work that we do, because we see those plants, a lot of rare plants, and we don't really know what their stature was. And when you look at Rock's photography, it's really shocking to see how large these plants were and how they grew. So that is a really important thing that Rock did, and he did a lot of very good work. He left Hawaii for a while. He got pissed off at the University of Hawaii for doing something he didn't like, and he went to China, and he wrote a dictionary of a native culture, and he really did amazing things. I forgot the name of it, but he did great work. And there's a guy who did a movie about him called A King in China. And his name is Paul Harris, and he's a movie director, and he did a great movie. And I hosted him. He came here one time, and we showed it at the Kona Outdoor Circle. So anyway, Rock's friend was Paul Weissig. And Paul Weissig was a young botanist, and he met Rock, and they became very good friends. They traveled together, they did botanizing all over Hawaii, they went to Vienna. Rock was originally from Vienna, and he was self-taught. And Rock was never married. So when he died, he made Paul Weissig the executive of his estate. And Paul was a great botanist himself. He was the director of the Honolulu Botanical Gardens, which comprises 7 gardens, for 20 years, I think from 1969 to 89. And he loved, again, the dry forest. He came to Kona, and that's how I knew him, and through this Rock connection. And I asked him, because I wanted to create an arboretum, and I had a plan for many years to create an arboretum in Hawaii, and I asked him if I could use Rock's name to name the arboretum, and he said that Rock would be honored, and since Kona was his favorite place, right on, go for it. So I lucked out on that one. I bought some land in Kona from the Greenwell family. And this land, I told them that I wanted to create an arboretum, and it's in Kona, and it's called the Joseph Rock Arboretum. So that is where the Hawaii Island Seed Bank is housed, and Future Forest Nursery, and if you ever want to visit, please do. So that's Rock. All right. So there's some amazing things that Hawaiian farmers have done. And I've always noted them, and it's sort of helped inform the way that I work with land in Hawaii. One of them is they did tree plantations. So I teach a class on the earliest human land use. And the earliest human land use is called forest farming. So early humans did not clear and open spaces. They grew things among and in the forest. And Hawaiians did a layered kind of farming with tree plantations. So I think that's very interesting. They did lo'i, right? They did the ponds, and they did what are awai? Does anybody know what awai is? Peter?
They're the rock channels that direct the water.
They're here, aren't they? At Amy Greenwell?
No, we have,
What are yours called? Kauaivi. Kauaivi. Those are ridges. Okay. All right. And mulching, well, of course, the ahupua'a model, right? The Hawaiian model is from the sea to the land. The way the land is divided is called the ahupua'a. And so the communities had access to all of this. Such a brilliant way of doing things. You had access to resources from the sea to the highest elevations. Mulching is really interesting to me too. Hawaiians used tree fern leaves and kukui nut branches and leaves for mulching, and wonderful stuff that we still do today. A lot of plant breeding and selection. There were many, I think there were, I don't have, how many, over 50 varieties of maya, of banana, and the sugarcane taro, there were probably 200 varieties, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of really good care of plant varieties of their food crops. It's amazing, and the fish ponds are amazing too. Koloko, the Koloko Pond at Koloko Honokohau National Park is a really good example of that. And of course, Hawaiians were canoe builders, navigators, stonemasons, feather work. You can see at the Four Seasons, that big feather cape. I like that in the lobby. And tattoo, weaving, dye, ohe kapala, kapa, dancing, chanting, storytelling, musical instruments and games, all kinds of beautiful things that represent the Hawaiian culture. So that's my ho'okupu. Thank you so much, Hawaiian culture, for sharing this beautiful place. So I teach a class just on this slide, but I'm going to keep it really brief. So here's how you can understand Hawaiian botany really fast, really simply. You have 4 categories. Endemic. Endemic means that it's unique to a place. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It could be endemic to Hawaii, or it could be endemic to a Hawaiian island, or it could even be endemic to a certain mountain or ridge. Very, very specific. And so that's the, and so what do we have there? What's our mother? What is the mother tree of Hawaii? Ohia. So the ohia, that was my representation of endemic. And what else? We have like koa. There's so many endemic, and they occur in the higher elevations. As you get lower, you have more indigenous species, especially on the coast. So indigenous means that it got somewhere without the hand of humans. So we're talking about things that floated and got here pre-Polynesian, so pre-human. So one of the plants that I think is fascinating that is indigenous, that it was thought to be a Polynesian introduction, is ko. Do you remember that paper when that came out, Peter, about ko? Because it was always thought to be a canoe plant, and then they found that it was here before humans. So that's fascinating. And then we have Polynesian introductions. Okay, so Polynesian introductions are the canoe plants. There's about maybe 24, give or take, plants that Polynesians brought with them to the islands when they came here. And I'm going to show you my list. I think it's a pretty good list. I looked at a lot of lists just for curiosity lately, and there's some weird lists out there. So I feel like my list is okay, so we'll see if anybody disagrees. But there's the Polynesian, so those are the canoe plants. And so for indigenous, what do we have here? What's that plant? Can you tell? A'ali'i, Dodonaea viscosa. So Dodonaea, a lot of people think that's like native to Hawaii. It isn't. You know that I was in Kenya looking at a project, and you know what one of their species they were planting was? Dodonaea. I'm like, what? What are you doing with A'ali'i? They're like, no, that's Dodonaea. So that is not endemic to Hawaii, but it is an important plant here. And we got my favorite here. We have, we got ko, so that would be what? Canoe plant. And then we've got our post-contact, or aliens. And I put these into 2 categories, invasive and non-invasive. So there's my beauty. Isn't that pretty? I don't know the name of it, but I love that. Rose. Rose is not invasive here, right? But this is my nemesis. This is going to be my devil for the rest of my life. Haulikoa. So it is one of the top 100 weeds of the world. Again, I was in Tanzania. I'm standing there leaning on a tree. I look up and I said, what is that? And he said, oh, that's Lucena. It's a weed here. And I'm like, oh, no. Again? So I wasn't happy about that. It was like 35 feet tall, very bad. So that is a post-contact introduction, and it is a serious weed in Hawaii. So here's the canoe plants, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I wanted to kind of just show you the list. And you can see at the top, Co is now classified as indigenous. If you have any corrections, Peter, let me know. You know, coconut, Cocos nucifera, was that, you know, a pre-human, because that can float in water, right, and get to, and it could be, you know, it's a question. I saw some people's list, they had Milo as what was it? It was, I think somebody had it as an indigenous plant, but I thought it was a Polynesian introduction.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay. And then let's see what else. Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, anybody have any comments on that? Okay. So Hawaiian botany today. I want to talk about the importance of ex-situ conservation. So in situ means that you're doing work in the field. And ex-situ means that you're doing preservation of plants outside of the field. And the global strategy for plant conservation names two very important today ex-situ strategies. And they are botanical gardens and seed banks. And so this is very important for the work that we do, both at this garden, Amy Greenwell, and with the Hawaii Island Seed Bank. And I started the Hawaii Island Seed Bank in 2008, and it has partners that bank their seeds with us, including the Amy Greenwell Garden. And they can save a portion of their seeds for restoration, for propagation as needed, and for the next generation, which is very, very important for me. And so we have lost so many plants due to coffee. This is a quote, actually, that I got from the list of the first botanist, his trip on plant collecting, the first with Captain Cook. And this is what it said. I should have I'm sorry I didn't put that. We have lost so many plants due to coffee farming, logging, grazing animals, and development. We don't know all of the plants that have been lost. There are at least 15 in the small collection by Nelson that were never identified because they no longer exist. Isn't that fascinating that they wrote that in the 1780s, or whenever that was? I think it was 1778 or something. So already they were noticing that plants were being lost. So there are two ex-situ conservation tools, and I told you there are seed banks and botanical gardens. So I think that the Amy Greenwell Garden is a very, very progressive garden because Amy Greenwell was a real botanist, and she created a Hawaiian garden. You know, gardens historically were established by kings, right? And people with money. That's how gardens are, basically to show off your beautiful flora or flora that you've collected from other places in the world. And that's why gardens exist, and that's how that was sort of what was driving what these collections were. Today, gardens are much more aware of climate change, of different shifts, and the importance of their native species. And so gardens are doing a lot more work with taking care of their natives. And that's where seed banks come in, because it provides you with an ex-situ conservation tool. So Laukahi just did a gap analysis in Hawaii. They just did a report looking at what is the best way to preserve biodiversity in Hawaii. And they had micropropagation, seed banks, nurseries, and there were like 4 or 5 different things, places where we can save biodiversity. And you know what the top one by far was, the most economical way to preserve biodiversity in Hawaii? It is seed banks. You can store millions of seeds in a small space. So seed banks are critical as a tool for us for the future, and to leave the next generation with the valuable resources that we have now, because we are losing these mother trees. They're old and senescent, and it's not, they're just living their lives, and we don't know what their lifespans are. They might be under pressures, or the climate shifts can cause loss of the genetics. So we need to really take care. So welcome to the seeds, the mother of time. Seeds represent the cyclical nature of time. We can reflect on how all living things are born and die. Seeds are life that represent time by being collected, planted, harvested, and replanted. Healthy humans are the keepers of the seeds. The seed keepers are the shamans of time. And I just wanted to tell you a few points that I've been thinking about in the work that I do. One is that I think it's really important that we learn from the earth. Instead of learning about the earth, that's the way we've done it. But it's also, we need to learn from the earth, and that's by observing. And also, I think we need to spend as much time in reflection as we do with this massive influx of data. We're addicted to all of the information of our world. And this time since 1994 and the internet and this availability of information is enormous, and it's a real valuable thing. And certainly people in the developing world are learning really fast, people that didn't have access to information in many, many levels. But I do think we also need to really reflect and to go inward and to heal ourselves. And I wanted to read one of Terence's quotes. There are many, many hundreds and thousands of quotes by him, but this is the one I picked for right now. It is clearly a crisis of 2 things, of consciousness and conditioning. There are 2 things that the psychedelics attack. We have the technological power, the engineering skills to save our planet, to cure disease, to feed the hungry, and to end war. But we lack the intellectual vision, the ability to change our minds. We must decondition ourselves from 10,000 years of bad behavior, and it's not easy. And so here is the Hawaii Island Seed Bank, and I have students and adults come and work and help collect seeds and save seeds and learn how to care for seeds. And we are the children of the seeds. We depend on the seeds, we follow the seeds, we eat the seeds. Everything about the seeds is we are dependent on. I'm so grateful for the seeds. I'm so grateful for nature. And thank you. And I'm so grateful for the people of Hawaii who help me, and this garden who takes care of the plants. And so here is the seed bank. It's an off-grid. There's no electricity on my property. All the buildings are solar powered. And we handle the seed collections for partners. so they will remain viable for a year or for decades. And our intention is to save seeds for the next generation. So I have a microscope camera and I love seeds. So I like to take pictures and look at them up close because they're so beautiful to look at. So please partner and join me. And this is sacred work. Every time we care for seeds, we are saying yes to the future and to all of the mother's children. So thank you very much for listening.